Welcome to the deep dive. We've got some important stuff. You shared a press briefing from VIA, that's the Vidarbha Industries Association, and also an article from the Times of India. Both are looking at these proposed changes to electricity tariffs here in Maharashtra. So let's dig into that.
Yeah, definitely need to.
Our mission today really is just to get a handle on how these potential shifts from MSEDCL, the state distribution company, could actually impact you, the average electricity user.
It's a timely conversation, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about solar power. I mean, the cost to install solar panels has dropped like hugely,
Right.
around 50% down over just the last 5 years, which sounds great, makes it more affordable. But these new tariff ideas, they might just cancel out a lot of those savings for people.
Exactly. And this is where, it gets really important to understand what's potentially happening. Sources suggest we could see the payback time for a solar investment actually double.
Double.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the way you sell back extra solar power, those terms could get a whole lot worse.
Less favorable for sure.
Now, MSEDCL, they argue they need these changes, cover costs, improve the grid. That's their side. But then you've got groups like VIA saying, hang on, this could hurt investment, hurt manufacturing. It's a real point of tension.
Absolutely. And one of the big sticking points is this time of day tariff proposal from MSEDCL. VIA is really pushing back hard against that.
Okay, let's break that down. What's VIA's main problem with the time of day, or 2D tariffs?
Well, they're basically saying these TOD tariffs would just hike up power costs for industries. Yeah. And they make the point that industries in Maharashtra are already paying more than a lot of other states.
Right, that's a key argument for them.
Yeah, and Girdhari Mantri from VIA, he put a number on it. He said for solar installations, the time it takes to get your money back could jump from around 3 years now to potentially 6 years under these new TOD rules.
6 years, that really changes the math for anyone considering solar, doesn't it? Especially smaller businesses.
It's a huge difference. It can make them think twice, definitely. And it's not just the payback time. There's also this proposed change in, when you can actually use your own solar power.
Oh, how so?
So right now, VIA points out that industrial users can pretty much use their self-generated solar power for about 20 hours a day.
Okay.
The new proposal, though, would restrict that benefit just to between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m.
Just standard office hours, basically.
Exactly. And for all the other hours, you'd have to buy power from MSEDCL, probably at, higher rates.
Huh. So even if you invest in solar to be more self-reliant, maybe cut your carbon footprint, you're still kind of forced back onto the grid outside those specific hours.
That's the concern, yeah. It feels a bit counter to the whole idea of energy independence that solar offers.
It does. And that kind of leads into another big issue, right? This whole net metering versus net billing thing.
Precisely. Now, the Times of India article mentions that MSEDCL's petition right now, the one before the regulators, MRAC, it doesn't explicitly ask to change net metering. Not yet.
Okay, yet being the key word there.
Seems like it, because they have made it clear in their filings that they're not fans of the current net metering system.
Right. So maybe for folks who aren't totally clear on this, can you just quickly explain net metering versus net billing?
Sure. So net metering, the system we mostly have now for solar rooftops, any extra electricity your panels make that you don't use right away, it goes back to the grid. And you basically get a credit for it on your bill. It's almost like a one-for-one swap. The units you send back cancel out units you pull from the grid later, like at night. It worked out pretty well for the solar owner.
Okay, yeah, that sounds straightforward and pretty fair if you've made the investment. So net billing, how's that different? And why would MSEDCL want that instead?
Right, so net billing is different. When you send excess power back to the grid, you sell it to the utility, but at a wholesale rate.
Ah, okay.
Girdhari Mantri from VIA estimated this could be around, say, 3 to 4 euros per unit. But then when you need to buy electricity from the grid, maybe in the evening, you buy it back at the full retail rate.
Which is much higher.
Yeah, he mentioned around 9 euro per unit. So you're selling your power cheap and buying it back expensive.
Oof. That sounds like it would really slash the financial benefit of having solar panels.
Absolutely. It makes the whole proposition much less attractive, financially speaking.
And MSEDCL's reason for wanting this, they're saying they're actually losing money because of rooftop solar.
That's their claim. In their submission, they stated a loss of 224 crore, specifically due to rooftop solar consumers, up until March 2019.
Okay.
Their argument is basically that solar users are shifting from being subsidizing consumers who help pay for lower rates elsewhere to being subsidized themselves.
Right, because they're buying less power overall.
Exactly. And MSEDCL is worried this trend could damage the cross-subsidy system, the one that helps keep rates lower for farmers and poorer households.
So from their perspective as the utility, they see rooftop solar potentially upsetting their financial structure and their ability to subsidize certain groups. I can see the logic there, but what do the solar experts say? The Times article had some counterpoints.
It did, yeah. Ajit Ganguly, a solar expert, made a really interesting point. He said, look, all the power from rooftop solar put together, it's less than 0.3% of MSEDCL's total power purchases.
Less than 0.3%.
Tiny. So he questions how such a small amount could really be causing such big financial problems for them. Makes you wonder, right?
It really does put that 224 crore figure in perspective. Seems like a stretch to blame it all on such a small fraction. And didn't Ganguly also mention MSEDCL's own track record with renewables?
He did. He pointed out that MSEDCL has consistently failed to meet its own targets for buying renewable power, the Solar Renewable Purchase Obligation, or RPO.
They have targets they're supposed to hit.
Yeah, mandated targets. And back in 2017-18, for instance, they only hit about 40% of their solar target.
Wow.
So to make up for that shortfall, they actually have to buy these things called Renewable Energy Certificates, RECs, which cost them money about 2.4 a bear per unit on average.
So wait, they're falling short on their own green energy goals and paying extra for it, but also trying to potentially make rooftop solar less appealing.
Seems contradictory, doesn't it? Ganguly argues it goes against the national goal, too, which wants, 40% of solar to come from rooftops.
It does sound inconsistent. And there was another expert, Sudhir Budhe, who asked a pretty basic question, didn't he, about MSEDCL's finances before solar really took off.
That's right. Booty basically asked, well, was MSEDCL profitable before 2015 when rooftop solar regulations weren't really a big thing?
Good question.
His point being, maybe blaming current financial issues just on rooftop solar is too simplistic. Maybe there are other operational issues at play.
Right.
And Booty also suggested something interesting. Maybe any new rules for solar shouldn't be compulsory.
Yeah.
Make them optional. Let people choose what works best for them.
That seems reasonable. Give consumers a choice rather than potentially stifling a clean energy source.
Okay, so stepping back a bit, VIA also has bigger worries about electricity prices in Maharashtra overall, not just the solar stuff.
That's right. They really hammer the point that industrial power costs here are already high compared to other states.
Significantly higher.
They say so. They cite a figure rates for 33 kV industrial consumers have gone up by roughly 50% in just the last 5 years.
50%? Whoa!
Yeah, from about 5.90 per unit up to 8.85. So they see these new proposals as just piling on, making Maharashtra less competitive for industry.
And that potentially affects everyone if industries struggle or choose to locate elsewhere.
Exactly. It impacts jobs, the economy, potentially the cost of goods made here.
So what does VIA suggest MSEDCL should do instead of these tariff hikes?
They're urging the regulator, MRC, to just reject these proposed tariffs flat out.
And they say MSEDCL should focus inward first. Improve operational efficiency. Things like getting better deals when they buy power, cutting down on distribution losses, which can be significant.
You mean power theft or technical losses?
Both, yeah. Just generally tighten up operations to save money internally, rather than passing costs on to consumers.
Seems like standard business practice, improve efficiency first. And they also brought up those cross-subsidies again, right? The ones MSEDCL is worried about.
They did, but from the opposite angle. VIA argues that industrial consumers are already carrying an unfairly large or disproportionate share of the cross-subsidy burden.
So industries are paying too much to subsidize others.
That's their argument. They say it puts Maharashtra industry at a disadvantage compared to states where that burden might be lower. They even claim MSEDCL calculates these subsidies differently and maybe unfairly compared to private players like Tata Power or Adani who operate in Mumbai.
Interesting. And speaking of those private players in Mumbai, VIA had a suggestion related to that for the rest of the state, didn't they?
They did. They're basically saying, why not allow private electricity distributors to compete in other parts of Maharashtra, too?
Like they do in Mumbai now.
Exactly. They point to Mumbai, where they claim tariffs are lower thanks to competition between Tata, Adani, and Best. The idea is more competition could lead to better prices and service for everyone, including maybe better deals for solar users.
More choice for consumers, potentially driving down costs. Makes sense. Okay, so let's tie all this back directly to you, the listener. It really sounds like if these MSEDCL proposals go through, well, it could be a bit grim.
It could. The financial appeal of going solar definitely takes a hit if that payback period doubles. That alone might make people pause, whether it's for their home or business.
For sure. And that potential shift from net metering to net billing, that sounds like a big deal.
Huge. Getting paid much less for the extra power you generate means your overall savings shrink. You'd rely more on buying expensive grid power, especially evenings and mornings. Your bills might not drop nearly as much as you hoped, even with panels on the roof.
Right, so the whole economic calculation changes. And like we touched on, it's not just about people with solar, is it? If industries face higher costs.
Yeah, that can ripple through the whole state economy.
Mhm.
It could mean higher prices for goods and services eventually, maybe slower job growth. It affects everyone indirectly.
And it's crucial to grasp that these aren't just isolated proposals. If MSEDCL succeeds here, it could absolutely set a precedent. Other distribution companies or discoms across India might look at this and think, hey, we can do that too.
Exactly. It could potentially undermine rooftop solar incentives nationwide, which would be a real setback for consumers everywhere looking to lower bills and use cleaner energy.
Okay, so given all this potential negativity, this uncertainty, it might feel a bit discouraging, but there's another way to look at this, right? Based on what we said earlier.
Absolutely. Remember that first point solar installation costs have fallen dramatically.
Yeah.
It's much cheaper to go solar now than it was 5 years ago.
Right. So you've got falling costs on one hand and these potentially unfavorable rule changes looming on the other.
Which actually creates a kind of urgency. If you've been thinking about solar, now might genuinely be the best time to act.
Before these potential changes actually kick in.
Exactly. Lock in the current, more favorable net metering rules, secure those lower costs, and potentially shield yourself from these future hikes and less beneficial billing systems. Acting now could mean securing better long-term savings.
Take control of your energy costs before the goalposts possibly shift.
Precisely. It's about being proactive in an uncertain environment.
And if you are thinking about taking that step, about acting now, well, navigating all this can seem complicated. That's where having a reliable partner comes in. We should mention IHS Envirotek here. They're an experienced provider of solar solutions. And importantly, they talk about delivering guaranteed results with what they call their advanced solar system.
Right. Having that kind of expertise and guarantee could be really valuable, especially now with all this uncertainty swirling around.
Definitely. So if you're feeling that urge to secure your energy future before things potentially change, looking into what a company like IHS Envirotek offers seems like a really practical next step. They can help figure out the current incentives, design the right system.
And importantly, potentially get you set up under the current, more advantageous rules. It's about leveraging the current situation before it possibly changes.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. Key takeaways from our deep dive today. These proposed tariff changes in Maharashtra could really hit the average consumer, especially if you're interested in solar.
Yeah, that potential doubling of the payback period, the shift away from net metering towards less favorable net billing. Those are serious concerns.
And the worry that this isn't just about Maharashtra, it could pave the way for similar changes elsewhere, making rooftop solar less financially viable across the board.
Which really underlines that sense of urgency we talked about. The window to benefit from the current solar policies might be narrowing.
So it leaves us with a pretty direct final thought for you to consider. Given these potential and frankly quite negative shifts possibly coming down the pipeline, what steps could you explore right now to really take control and secure your own energy future? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.